Miraculous Part 8. There, while praying and without realizing it or having any prior thoughts on the matter, he made an offering. He promised to dedicate the church and the monastery to the grace-filled feast of the Dormition of the Most Holy Theotokos. As the sun's rays filtered through the thick tree foliage and fell upon the icon, its colors grew vivid, coming to life with rare effulgence. The radiance was so wondrous that it solidified his decision. Indeed, the Dormition of the Theotokos. This new cenobium would become the adornment of this most ancient mountain. A smile of joy radiated across his face for the first time in months. He raised his arms towards heaven, giving thanks to the Lord and the most pure Virgin for granting him the illumination to make this dedication. He took a deep breath, his soul rejoicing. This inner joy had erased all his apprehensions, his lack of funds, his inexperience in construction, and even his bodily weakness. His eyes envisioned the monastery as if it already stood before him. His ears could almost hear the church bells ringing, signaling the coming of dawn, calling the brethren to Orthros, Vespers, small compline, and all-night vigils. He felt with certainty that the entire place was under the protection of the Panagia. Ecstasy filled his heart as he imagined the sweet fragrance of incense soon flooding this sacred ground. He remained in this blessed, euphoric state for a long time. But when his gaze returned to the rock where he had rested the icon of the Dormition, he could no longer see it. With trepidation and disbelief, he walked toward the rock. He searched around it, behind it, everywhere his eyes could reach, but the icon had vanished. He stood up, scratching his head, and gazed once more upon the rock, his heart heavy with agony and anguish. He pondered deeply on the cause of this new trial. Had the Theotokos turned her face away from him because of his unworthiness? Could it be that the entire plan, the building of the monastery, was not inspired by God, but rather a delusion born of demonic pride and the arrogance of his own sinful and unworthy heart? He remained deeply troubled and distressed with his mind and soul when suddenly something like a flash of lightning struck his eyes. He turned towards the cabin and witnessed a most fearful yet awe-inspiring and wondrous sight. The cabin, enveloped in the brightest of lights, appeared as if heaven's brightest star had descended and rested upon it. At first, fear gripped him, but he continued on slowly as he eventually approached the cabin. Inside, he saw the icon shining bright as the sun, standing on a simple stool with a pickaxe and shovel lying beneath it. Father Christophoros fell to the ground and venerated the Mother of God with tears streaming from his eyes. His earlier fears gave way to deep, heartfelt joy. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, he understood that this miracle of the Most Holy Theotokos was a clear sign. He was to turn the cabin into her church and begin building the monastery he had promised her. With the help of the Lord and strength from above, he began the construction alone. He started with the materials his brothers had already gathered and didn't worry about where the rest would come from, trusting that the Lord would provide. His days were filled with prayer, strenuous labor, and steady progress on the construction. Some local shepherds would stop by to lend a hand for a few hours, while others offered him bread. But there were days when he had nothing to sustain him other than mountain greens and water. One day, as he rose at dawn and walked over to the creek with the running water, he noticed a donkey grazing beneath the trees. The donkey greeted Father Christophoros with a joyful bray, and as he gently stroked the humble creature, he considered it a companion sent from heaven. The animal stood beside him, patient and motionless, as he completed his morning prayers. Then, as if bound by an unspoken loyalty, the donkey followed him to the building site like an old and devoted friend. "May you be blessed, good and humble creature of God," said Father Christophoros. With a grateful heart, he turned back to his holy work, his strength renewed by the presence of his newfound companion. 3 months passed, and summer was now at its peak. An overgrown and mature fig tree became his source of sustenance during the scorching months, beginning with the feast of Saint Marina. Its abundant fruit provided enough nourishment to sustain him through the season and also into the winter months. Carefully harvesting a generous supply of figs, he dried them in the sun and stored them inside a hollow tree, covering the opening with a flat piece of wood, shielding them from the birds. What the average person consumed in a day was enough to sustain Father Christophoros for an entire week. At midday, he ate just 3 figs and a small portion of bread, yet he had never felt stronger or fuller of vitality. Nevertheless, he knew that difficult days lay ahead. Soon, he would run out of building materials and would need carpentry work as well as icons for the iconostasi. Undeterred, he continued his daily routine, keeping watch over his mind in prayer. The next morning, he grabbed his supply bag and, along with his donkey, set off toward the neighboring villages. He set out to ask for help from the Christians of the shepherd fields and the neighboring villages, seeking funds to complete the monastery. Father Christophoros had acquaintances and friends in the neighboring villages, and many were aware of the events that had unfolded in Arbouna over the past few months, though each person held their own interpretation of what had happened. His expectations quickly unraveled at the central inn of Saint Paraskevi. As soon as he began to explain his intention to build a monastery, Kostas, the owner of the village inn, who had long been at odds with his brothers, grabbed him by the neck and shouted, "Who gave you permission to enter my inn, you filthy beggar? You're nothing but a charlatan pretending to build a monastery." With a forceful shove, Kostas threw Father Christophoros to the ground, causing the few coins he had in his hand to scatter across the floor. "Hey Kostas, why are you abusing Papoulakos? What has he done to you?" Elder Paraskevas Kalostipis called out in concern. "He's a liar," Kostas retorted angrily. "His family has enough money to build 3 monasteries, but they are holding on to it. And now he has the audacity to try and use other people's money." The villagers stood in silence, watching the exchange, as Father Christophoros sensed that he owed them an explanation. "Kostas is right," he said, addressing them. "My brothers have plenty of money, but none of it belongs to me, not even a dime. As you can see, I am now a monk, and I have taken the vow of poverty, and I have willingly left my home and all my belongings behind. Monasteries, my brothers, are not built with money, but with love for our Christ. I built the church myself, stone by stone, but I still lack some things, and there remains some work that I cannot do with my own hands. You can come and see how much the church has progressed, but I'm still in need of some necessary items before a priest can celebrate the divine liturgy. So I'm begging for Panagia and not for myself or to add to my wealth. Get the hell off my property, Costas shouted again, lunging toward Father Christophoros with the intent to strike. But Elder Paraskevas stepped in front of him, his voice firm. Papoulakos is doing nothing wrong. Everyone is free to choose whether they want to help him or not. So lower your hand. If you don't want to believe him and consider him a liar, that's your prerogative. As for me, I believe he's sincere, and I choose to give him my share for his monastery. Having said that, Elder Paraskevas, tall and sturdy like an ancient cypress tree, took a gold coin from his money belt and placed the generous contribution into the hand of Father Christophoros. God will reward you richly for this, Father Christophoros said, his voice filled with gratitude. No sooner had the words left his lips than Costas, the innkeeper, lost his footing and collapsed to the floor like a sack of potatoes. Costas was seen foaming at the mouth, his body trembling and his face pale, looking more dead than alive. Some believe he had suffered a stroke, while others whisper that he had become demon-possessed. However, all those present quickly interpreted the scene as a clear slap from the Lord. Fearful and unsure, they instinctively stepped away from him, giving him space as he squirmed on the ground. Father Christophoros was the only one who quickly knelt beside Costas. He gently wet the innkeeper's forehead with a handkerchief, wiped the foam from his lips, and prayed earnestly for his recovery, treating him as a brother. After what seemed like an eternity, Costas slowly regained consciousness. Weak, pale, and shattered, he looked Father Christophoros straight in the eyes and said, "Please forgive me, Papoulako." In a gentle tone, the elder responded, "God has already forgiven you, Costas." After the news of what had happened spread, the entire village of St. Paraskevi was in an uproar. What had occurred with Costas was seen by all as a miracle of the Panagia, and soon every villager, young and old, sought to receive the blessing of this humble Papoulakos. As they walked through the village, Elder Paraskevas by his side leading the way, the bells of the church of St. Paraskevi rang joyfully, filling the air with a sense of celebration. Men, women, the elderly, small children, and mothers with sick infants all hurried to meet him, eager to receive his blessing. The women reached out, touching his cassock, pleading for him to bless their sick infants. Father Christophoros turned to them in front of the church and spoke, "I am not a priest, so I cannot bless anyone. I am simply a servant of God and nothing more." The women persisted. "We want your blessing, Papoulako," their voices filling with hope. "Please, don't deny your blessing to our sick children." Father Christophoros sighed softly, his heart moved by their pleas. "I am not a priest to give blessings," he replied gently, "but I promise you that I will fast and continue to pray for your children." At that moment, Father Sofianos, the village's red-haired priest, appeared out of breath, having run from his home in a fit of outrage. "What is the matter with you?" he shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. "Have you all lost your minds? What about you?" He pointed directly at Father Christophoros. "Yesterday you were a butcher, and today you put on a cassock and walk around deceiving people." "Master, I don't deceive anyone," Father Christophoros replied, I am simply asking for help to finish my monastery. Who gave you permission to build a monastery and raise funds? Father Sofianos demanded. Do you have a letter from the bishop? No, I don't, Father Christophoros answered. I will send you to the abyss, Father Sofianos threatened, his face red with anger. Do what God guides you to do, Father Christophoros responded. Leave this village at once, Father Sofianos replied angrily. St. Paraskevi is not an open hunting ground. Who gave you the idea that you can come to our village and make money by scamming our people? He raged on. No one gave me any ideas, nor do I intend to scam a single human being, Father Christophoros declared in response. I made a vow to serve the Lord and to build a monastery on my land with my own hands for His Holy Mother. Now, do I need permission to fulfill my vow, or am I breaking any laws? You can do this with your own money, not with other people's, Father Sofianos shot back. The people here can barely feed their own priest or keep the oil lamps of St. Paraskevi lit year-round. So where are they supposed to find extra money to fund a monastery built by butchers? Elder Paraskevas, who had remained silent until now, saddened by the priest's conduct, finally spoke up, his voice steady and firm. Father Sofianos, we have been listening to your grumbling for 10 years now. The village offers enough oil to keep the lamps of St. Paraskevi burning twice over, yet most of it ends up in your kitchen and in your pancakes. As for your income, we pay our priest more than any of the surrounding villages. So what's come over you that you act in such a shameful manner? Papulakos is not doing anything wrong. On the contrary, he's doing something good for our area. And in the final analysis, we have respectable citizens free to spend our money as we see fit. Yes, but I am the priest here, Father Sofianos replied angrily, and I don't have the right to act as I wish or without the knowledge of my superiors. So I will report him to the synod, and the bishops can decide accordingly. For now, I demand that this impostor remove the cassock he wears unworthily. As he finished his words, Father Sofianos lunged forward, attempting to strip Father Christophoros of his cassock. But Elder Paraskevas stepped in swiftly, stopping him in his tracks. His voice was firm and unwavering. Papulakos is my guest, and he will stay in my house. All village women followed Elder Paraskevas, except for 3 who were related to the priest. Most of the men, ashamed of their priest's behavior, stood by Papulakos, insisting that he place his hand on their children's heads for blessing. Pleading with him to stay in their village as long as he wished, they viewed him as a man of God rather than a deceiver their priest had accused him of being. Amid the commotion, as the priest continued his threats and posturing, Kostas, the innkeeper, suddenly came running towards them. Out of breath, he pushed past the crowd and fell at Papulakos' feet. With deep remorse and tears in his eyes, he was kissing his feet and placed a bag full of money into his hands. Everyone, especially the women, erupted in cheers. "Bravo, Costa! Bravo!" they cried out, their voices filled with joy. Father Sofianos, now green with envy, clenched his fists and without another word stormed into the church, slamming the door shut behind him. Paraskevas was eager to take Father Christophoros to his home, offering him hospitality and the chance to converse with him in comfort. However, Father Christophoros gently declined the invitation. He considered it a sin to exchange beggary for the ease of wealthy homes. "We can talk for a bit while walking," he said to Paraskevas. "It'll take me more than 3 hours to reach the village of Kapikia." "It will soon be dark, Papulaco, and there will be no place for you to sleep," Paraskevas added with concern. Father Christophoros chuckled. "With so many trees and small caves along the way, will I not find a small patch of earth to lay down?" "You will sleep on the ground, out in the open?" Paraskevas asked, astonished. "Why not? What do I have to lose?" Father Christophoros replied, "What's there to be afraid of? I am weighed down with so many sins, Paraskevas, that the last thing I want to do is avoid discomfort. Nevertheless, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your help toward the monastery of the Dormition and for your kindness." Father Christophoros said sincerely, "I will always keep you in my prayers. And as a reminder, continue to always do the will of God, and your reward will be great in God's kingdom." Upon leaving the village of St. Paraskevi, and while leading his trusted donkey up the slope with a rope, he noticed a man running towards him from the opposite direction. "Papulaco! Papulaco!" the man called out urgently. Father Christophoros stopped, watching as the stranger approached him. In front of him stood a tall, slender man, his clothing tattered and torn. "Are you Father Christophoros?" the man asked, breathless. "Yes, I am," replied the elder. "I want to confess," exclaimed the man. "I don't hear confessions," Father Christophoros replied gently. "I'm not a priest, and I don't have that authority." The man looked at Father Christophoros with desperation in his eyes. "What if you knew I would be dead in a day or two? Would you still refuse to hear my sins?" Father Christophoros hesitated, studying him carefully. "I don't follow you, my brother," he said. "Who are you? Where are you coming from?" "They're chasing after me, Papuli," the man admitted, his voice cracking. "They're after me because I killed my wife." Father Christophoros' expression remained calm, though a shadow of sorrow crossed his face. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. "She kept telling me to leave, and I assumed she was involved with another man. She complained that I was lazy, irresponsible, and that the only thing I knew how to do was get her pregnant." "How many children do you have?" Father Christophoros asked. "5, the man answered. "The youngest is 2, and the oldest is 10. "What kind of work do you do?" "I do a little bit of everything," he stated. Father Christophoros studied him for a moment before asking, "How did you know my name and that I would be walking toward Kapikia?" "I was passing by the inn when I saw Kostas push you to the ground," the man admitted. Father Christophoros nodded solemnly. "Who's taking care of your children now?" "I don't know," the man whispered, his voice breaking. "I ran after I struck her with a knife. I've been on the run for the last 3 days and nights." He clenched his fists, his whole body trembling. "I feel like I'm losing my mind thinking that I might rot in the prisons of Rio," he stated in desperation. Father Christophoros remained silent, pulling his donkey along as the murderer walked beside him. The two moved forward in a quiet understanding, the only sounds coming from their footsteps on the dirt path. After some time, Father Christophoros finally spoke. "What's your name?" Michael Gupas," the man replied. They continued walking in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Then, after a while, Father Christophoros asked, "Why did you say earlier that you would be dying soon?" Michael responded, I was planning to finish myself off so they wouldn't catch me alive. They walked side by side for an hour in complete silence. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Father Christophoros calculated that at their current pace, they still had at least 2 more hours before reaching Capica. "Why don't you ride your donkey, Papulaco?" Michael asked. "Why should I burden this poor creature with my weight when my legs serve me just fine? Then why bring it along at all?" "For companionship," Father Christophoros replied. Michael looked at the donkey, nodded, and said, "You're right, Papulaco. Had I chosen such a companion as well, I wouldn't be a fugitive and a murderer at this very moment." Father Christophoros met his gaze and gently interrupted. "We are not speaking of the same thing, Michael.